Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly Hebrew word study. It's good to be back and to be studying with you again. And I hope you enjoy the lesson from today and that you've had a good week and enjoying this beautiful, beautiful weather. Well, as you can see on our screen, we are continuing with this saga of following David on his pathway to become king of Israel. And there's just so many wonderful episodes here as we follow David. And here we are in 1 Samuel chapter 25, picking up with verse 13. And remember that David and his men are fleeing from Saul. They have had to run around and hide, and they've been in the wilderness. He has about 600 men, and now they're going to encounter the man named Nabal, as you may have known and heard of him from the last episode that we had. And of course, the last episode, Nabal did not treat David's ambassadors, his emissaries, very well. And so David hears about this and he gets very angry. And he's going to exact revenge upon this man. And he feels slighted because he protected his flocks. He protected the shepherds that worked for him, and this guy just kind of rejected him and wasn't going to show kindness in return. So it's interesting here to see how David reacts in verse 13. Vayomer David la'anashav hag or hig ru. So the word higru is to gird on. And just what's interesting about this verse is that it's somewhat redundant. It says, "And David said to his men, gird on your sword or arm yourself with a sword." And then it says that they did that. A very unnecessary commentary on it. It would have been enough to just say David's told everyone to put their sword on. You would assume that they would have done that. So why did the verse have to say, "So girded every man his sword"? And then, of course, David is telling them to put their sword on. You think it would just be natural intuitiveness that David would also have put his sword on. So why do we need the last part of the verse to say, "And David also took his sword and put it on"? And it's just kind of an interesting group of thoughts here, that David said, "Put your swords on." So they put their swords on. So then David put his sword on. And then they went about 400 men, and 200 stayed with the supplies. Um, I just thought it was interesting. There's nothing profound about it, but just there's something that maybe will have some meaning sometime later, but right now it just stuck out to me that this was somewhat of a redundant sentence. It was emphasis on girding up your sword, going to battle. Maybe it just shows how wroth David was, that he was going to take 400 men and go after Naval, who, okay, Naval was one guy. Why do you need 400 men? And okay, maybe he had some servants, but they were not fighting men, and he probably didn't have 400 servants that he could, that this wasn't an even battle. So maybe this is just to emphasize that David kind of flew into a rage. Um, Also, looking at what was about to happen here, that David was going to go with these men and kill and slaughter them. Is that exact punishment? Is that a worthy retribution for someone just saying, "No, I'm not going to feed you"? Certainly not. So this shows a little bit about the passion of David, and maybe that's what this verse is intending to show, that David flew into a rage, was able to get his men in a likewise frenzy, and they were set on shedding blood for an offense that really um, was not worthy of shedding blood for. And so, again, nothing in the Torah, nothing in the laws of God that would say that, okay, because someone didn't feed you, you get to go and kill them. Definitely not there. So maybe that's what this is speaking to us. So we see that God, in his great mercy for David, begins to intervene. And so somehow there are some men who know what's going on. Obviously, this took time for this to assemble, that someone could run back to Abigail, the wife of Nabal, and report what was happening. And so that's what verse 14 is all about, telling about how the men of David were good to them. And of course, verse 15, um, tells them that nothing was missing, no one was hurt. They were protection to them in the fields by night and watching the sheep. And of course, now they're going to come and harm all of them, not just their master, but they're worried about their lives too. And then when we get to the end of verse 17, here's another word that stood out to me. Um, it uses the word Belial, which is translated here as scoundrel. When I look into the Hebrew JPS, which is very similar to the King James, it says he is a base fellow. Other versions will say he is worthless. And that's the word that stuck out to me, is the idea of someone being worthless. And here, obviously, this is name calling, this is labeling, this is identifying people, and it's obviously very prevalent in this culture, as it still is in our culture today, of calling someone a name. And here, that just, I don't know, doesn't resonate well with me. And because I remember Jesus speaking, saying, that we shouldn't call anybody a fool, we shouldn't call anybody worthless, and that it took note with him that we shouldn't be judging people in such a way. But yet here we see that it's happening. And so I thought, let's take a look at this word that's translated here as scoundrel. It's H1100. So I'm going to go to um, just opening this up in the Bible Hub. And what comes out to me right away is that every Hebrew word traditionally has a three-letter consonant root. And here the original word actually has five letters. The Beit, the Lamed, the Yud, the Ayin, and the Lamed again, and it forms this word translated here by Strong's as worthlessness. And the word origin is from the Beli and the Ya'al. And of course, translations here range from base, destruction, rascal, scoundrel, worthless, worthless one. And we see worthless being the name that's chosen the most often. But because this is more than three letters, we find that it's a compound word. And so the first two letters here are actually prepositions that the beit and the lamed by themselves have meaning. The beit is meaning or of or at. The lamed can be to or for. It can also create a negative of no or not. And so we see these are two compound words. So let's take a look at what these words could mean by breaking them apart. So we go to Marcus Yastro's Dictionary of the Targumim, and we come down to this word that we're looking at here, and he translates it from the Aramaic as availing nothing or wickedness. We look at the words on either side of it, because that's the beauty of Hebrew and Aramaic, is the words that are formed with similar letters also have similar meanings. And so we see swallowing and gluttony, and then again below it we see swallowing. So you kind of get this idea that something is being drawn away, it's being pulled away, it's disappearing, it's creating a vacuum, it's creating an area of nothingness. So let's break it apart and take a look at the first couple letters here. And we look at the word that begins with the Beit, Lamed, and the Yud. And it talks about going to ruin or going to destruction, something that's another word for rotten pieces of wood, destruction or not. So you kind of get the idea that this is a guy whose life is being run into destruction, that he doesn't have any relationships. Everything he does is severed. Everything he does in a relationship mode is failed. And of course, that's why everybody is against him and that no one is for him. And so that's what this first part of the word means. So let's take a look at these. Breaking it apart here to the second part of the word. And of course, we have the yud, the lamed, or yud, ayin, and lamed, and it means to profit. So that would make sense that the second part of the word means to profit, accomplish, to have a good effect. But the first part is a negation. It's saying that it's not going to profit, it's not going to accomplish anything, and it's not going to have a good effect. So his word, this word that used to describe him, is really saying that whatever he does will not have a good end. And so that helps me process it a little bit, that it's not, again, attacking. Um, trying to find a way to process this and think, okay, what is it really saying about him? It's just saying that everything that he's been doing does not come to a good effect. Every relationship, every person he meets ends in a bad way, and that helps me understand a little bit more about his personality and character. Not that maybe it wasn't so clear before, but realizing why they chose this word, just to call someone a worthless person is challenging for me to process because of course every person is created in the image of God, and I believe every person has value. Every person has a plan and purpose that God has created for their life, and for um, someone to be called worthless, um, while it's very commonly done, something just resonates in my heart that that's not a pattern I should be following after. And knowing that God can reach and minister into every heart. Again, this is a different time frame, a different purpose. Um, we're going to see here that God will protect David from doing what he had intended to do, and that ultimately God is the judge and we are not. And we're going to see in this story that God does take things into his hands and pronounces the judgment that he saw was fit and true, and keeps it away from us who may not have that and do not have that ability to judge as God does, or to react as God does. And this story will come out in a way that shows us that God is in control. And if we let Him take care of situations rather than us put our hand to it, the outcome is in His perfect will and for His kingdom's cause. So I hope this story was interesting to you. Come back next week and we'll see how this interaction plays out, and how God protects not only Abigail and the rest of the servants, but also David and his men. So God bless you. Thanks again for being a part of this, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.